The arena stretched for miles in every direction. Massive stone walls rose toward the purple sky of Vexor Prime. Thousands of alien species packed the stands. They came from 100 different worlds. They had tentacles and scales and fur and skin that glowed in the dark. But today, they all wanted the same thing. They wanted blood. Marcus Kane stood in the center of the sandpit. His muscles were covered in sweat and dust. Scars crossed his chest and arms like a map of every battle he had survived. He was the last human in the galactic fighting pits. The others had died years ago, but Marcus refused to fall. He was too stubborn, too angry, too determined to show these aliens what a human could do. The Vexri Empire had taken him from Earth 10 years ago. They grabbed humans from isolated places. Farmers, hikers, soldiers on patrol. Anyone they could snatch without causing too much attention. The Vexri saw humans as primitive creatures. They thought Earth was just a source of entertainment, a planet full of violent apes who could fight for their amusement. Marcus had proved them right about one thing. He could fight. He had killed 17 opponents in the arena. Creatures with 4 arms, beasts with poisonous claws, warriors from proud military cultures that had been conquering planets for thousands of years. Marcus had beaten them all. Today, his opponent was a Kelthari warrior named Zorn. The Kelthari were massive beings. They stood 8 feet tall with gray skin as thick as armor. Their heads had 4 eyes and a mouth full of teeth like broken glass. Zorn was considered the greatest Kelthari fighter in 3 generations. His people had sent him to the arena to restore their honor after losing a border war. The fight had lasted almost an hour. Both warriors were bleeding from dozens of wounds. The sand around them was stained dark with their mixed blood. The crowd had screamed with joy through every moment. They loved watching the human struggle. They loved seeing him take damage that should have killed him. But humans were strange creatures. They kept fighting even when their bodies should have given up. Zorn swung his massive fist at Marcus. The human ducked under the blow. He drove his elbow into the Kelthari's knee joint. Zorn roared with pain and stumbled. Marcus grabbed the alien's arm and twisted. He used the creature's own weight against it. The technique was old. Humans had been using leverage and momentum for thousands of years. The aliens never expected it. They thought strength was everything. Zorn crashed to the ground. The impact shook the arena floor. Marcus was on him immediately. He wrapped his arm around the Kelthari's thick neck. He squeezed with every ounce of strength he had left. Zorn thrashed and fought. He clawed at the human's arms. He tried to roll and throw Marcus off. But the human held on like a creature possessed. The crowd rose to their feet. They stamped and howled and slammed their appendages against the railings. They could see it happening. The mighty Kelthari was losing. A primitive human from a backwater world was defeating one of the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Zorn's struggles grew weaker. His 4 eyes began to close. His massive body stopped thrashing. Marcus could feel the alien's pulse slowing under his grip. One more squeeze. One more moment of pressure, and it would be over. Another victory. Another name to add to his list. But something changed in that moment. Marcus looked down at the creature beneath him. Zorn was trying to speak. His voice came out as a weak whisper. The universal translator in Marcus's ear picked up the words. "My children," Zorn gasped. "They watch. They see." Marcus loosened his grip just slightly. The Kelthari continued speaking. His voice was filled with pain and something else. Something that sounded almost like sadness. "I did not want this," Zorn whispered. "The Empire took me, like they took you, my family. My home, gone. They said fight or die. So I fought. For 10 cycles I fought, to stay alive. To see my children again." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had assumed every opponent was a volunteer. He had believed they all wanted to be here. But now he understood. The Vexri Empire did not just take humans. They took warriors from every conquered world. They forced them to fight each other. They turned victims into killers for entertainment. The crowd was growing impatient. They wanted to kill. They wanted to see the human finish his enemy. The chanting began. First just a few voices, then hundreds, then thousands. The sound echoed off the stone walls like thunder. Death! 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 Marcus looked up at the stands. He saw the Vexury nobles in their private boxes. They wore robes made from the skin of extinct creatures. They drank wine that cost more than entire planets. They watched the violence with cold smiles on their scaled faces. This was just entertainment to them. Two slaves fighting for their amusement. The arena master appeared on the floating platform above the pit. He was a fat Vexury with rings on every finger. His voice boomed through the speakers. The human has won. Now he must claim his victory. The crowd demands blood. The chanting grew louder. Death. Death. The sound filled every corner of the arena. Marcus felt the pressure of a million eyes on his back. He knew what would happen if he refused. The Vexury would punish him. They would hurt him in ways that made fighting seem pleasant. They might even go after the other human prisoners. The ones who worked in the mines and factories. The ones who still held on to hope of going home someday. But Marcus also knew something else. He knew that if he killed Zorn, he would become exactly what the Vexury wanted him to be. A monster, a beast, an animal that killed on command. He would prove every terrible thing they said about humans. Marcus released his grip. He stood up slowly. His body ached with exhaustion. Blood dripped from a dozen wounds. But he stood straight. He stood proud. He stood like a human being who refused to be broken. The crowd fell silent. They did not understand what was happening. This had never occurred before. Fighters always finished their opponents. It was the law of the arena. It was the way things had always been done. Zorn lay on the ground gasping for air. He looked up at Marcus with confusion in his 4 eyes. The human reached down and offered his hand. Zorn stared at it for a long moment. Then slowly he reached up and took it. Marcus helped the massive alien to his feet. The arena master's voice cracked with anger. What is the meaning of this? Kill your opponent. The crowd demands blood. Marcus turned to face the floating platform. His voice was hoarse from exhaustion, but it carried across the silent arena. No, the word echoed off the stone walls. A single syllable that shook the foundations of everything the Vexury believed. Warriors did not refuse. Slaves did not say no. And yet here was this primitive human standing before thousands of spectators and rejecting their demands. You cannot refuse. The arena master screamed, "This is against all laws." Marcus spoke again. This time his voice was stronger. You took me from my home. You put a weapon in my hand. You forced me to fight. I did what I had to do to survive. But I will not murder another slave for your amusement. This warrior is not my enemy. You are. The crowd began to rumble with anger and confusion. Some spectators started throwing objects into the pit. Food containers and drink cups rained down on the 2 warriors. But neither of them moved. They stood together in the center of the arena. Human and Kelthari, 2 slaves who had been forced to fight, now united in their defiance. The Vexury guards began descending into the pit. They carried shock weapons and restraint devices. They would drag Marcus away. They would punish him for his disobedience. They would make an example of him for every other slave who might think of resisting. But something unexpected happened. Other fighters began climbing into the arena. They came from the waiting cells where they had been watching the match. A 4-armed Thraxian. A serpentine Voss warrior. A massive rock creature from the mining moons. One by one they jumped into the pit and stood beside Marcus and Zorn. The guards hesitated. There were only 12 of them. Now there were almost 30 fighters in the arena. All of them were skilled killers. All of them had been forced into slavery. And all of them had just seen something they had never witnessed before. They had seen someone say no. The crowd grew quiet again. Something historic was happening. Something that would be remembered for generations. A human from a primitive world had started a revolution with a single word. Marcus looked at the other fighters. He saw hope in their eyes. He saw the spark of something that had been missing for years. They had been fighting each other when they should have been fighting together. The Veggery had tricked them. They had made the slaves believe they were enemies. But now the truth was clear. "I do not know if we will survive this day," Marcus said. "But I know that I would rather die as a free man than live as a monster. You all have a choice to make. Stay with me and fight for your freedom. Or go back to your cells and wait for them to throw you in here again tomorrow." No one moved. No one went back to the cells. They all stayed, human and alien, standing together, ready to fight the real enemy. The arena master's face turned pale. He began calling for more guards. He demanded reinforcements from the city garrison. But the spectators in the stands had started to change as well. Not all of them were wealthy Vessery nobles. Many were common citizens from conquered worlds. They had come to watch the violence because there was nothing else to do. But now they were seeing something better. They were seeing resistance. They were seeing hope. Small fights broke out in the stands. Conquered people began turning on their Vexery masters. The revolution spread like fire through dry grass. What started in the arena pit soon moved through the entire stadium. Then it spread to the city beyond. Then to other cities, then to other worlds. Historians would later write that the Second Galactic Uprising began on that day. They would record that it started with a single human who refused to kill. They would study how one moment of mercy sparked the end of an empire that had ruled for 10,000 years. But Marcus did not think about history as he stood in that arena. He only thought about the creature he had chosen to spare. He thought about Zorn's children who would see their father survive. He thought about every human who would never have to fight in these pits again. The Vexery called humans primitive. They said Earth was a backwater planet full of violent savages. They believed strength and cruelty were the same thing. But they never understood what made humans truly dangerous. It was not their ability to fight. It was their ability to choose not to. It was their capacity for mercy. Their stubborn belief that there was always another way. Marcus Kane stood in the center of that bloody arena. He was battered and broken. He was outnumbered and surrounded. But he smiled, because he knew something the Vexery would never understand. Sometimes the strongest thing a warrior can do is put down his weapon. And sometimes a single act of mercy can change the entire galaxy.